Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. We'd like to move on to item 1.2 of our agenda, which is roll call. And I will ask our clerk, Jesse Clark, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Lamstead, are you present?
I am present.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
Councillor Braybrook?
Present.
Councillor Cadigan?
Present.
For staff, we have Donna Taggart, CIO Treasurer. Present. Evan Grieger, Director of Public Works.
Present.
Barbara Waldron, Director of Building and Planning, CBO. Present. Adele Arbor, Planner. Present. Bianca Dragicevic, Deputy Clerk. Present. And Jesse Clark, Director of Corporate Services, Clerk, is present.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 1.3 of our agenda, which is land acknowledgement and moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the William Treaties First Nation, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Trent Lakes respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of council. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now we can move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is approval of the agenda as circulated. See Councillor Franzen for a mover, Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any conversation about the agenda? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Now we can move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is the disclosure of pecuniary interest. If any member of council has a pecuniary interest on an item on the agenda, please disclose it now or anytime during the meeting prior to discussing anything on the item you have a pecuniary interest in. I'm seeing no hands. We can move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is adoptions of minutes. Item 4.1 is our regular council meeting of June the 3rd. See Councillor Cadigan for a mover. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any conversation about those minutes? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Now we can move on to item 5 of our agenda, which is committees and boards. Item 5.1 is the Committee of Adjustment and Appeals Committee of May the 6th. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Braybrook for a mover.
Motion to receive.
Okay, and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any conversation about the minutes? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 5.2, which is liaison reports for council boards and committees. Does anyone have anything to report? I'm seeing no hands. We can move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is our statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. We have none. Item 7 is business arising out of the statutory public meeting that we didn't have. We have none. Item 8 is presentations. We have none today. And item 9 is delegations. And 9.1 is Jeff Cheshire from Granite Ridge Estates Phase 2. Would you like to come to the podium and you thought you had more time? A light agenda.
That's okay. So I'd just like to thank everyone for seeing me here and hope we can get things turned around so I can keep moving forward with this subdivision. It's been a long time in the go. And I guess we're going to do some, while I speak, I think.
Go ahead, sorry.
I thought they were doing some slides or something.
Yes, I think they are. Are we?
So, the opportunity to speak today, respectfully request the council. Well, this, sorry, I was supposed to say this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am respectfully requesting the council assume the ownership of my stormwater management pond in Granite Ridge Phase 2 to support a balanced and modern approach to fencing, one that reflects best practices, local and precedents. The reason we were in this state or shape we're in is because I was given bad advice from the get-go from the planning people that I hired to try and do a plan of condominium on the pond and stormwater management, but apparently the MOE won't accept that, so we have to do what we're doing now to get it away from that. And if it was a plan of condominium, the whole property, then we could do that, but because it's only the easements and the pond, we can't do that. Now, what we also have learned is that there's 49 ponds that the municipalities own locally here. There's 52 in total, 3 of them are plans of condominiums, but they're complete plans of condominiums. The roads and everything are maintained by the owner of that. And the perimeter fencing that people are asking for is a real issue, because we're going to build houses around the pond, and they're not going to want a fence that nobody's going to maintain around it, but also a deterrent to animals and wildlife, especially turtles. That there's all kinds of turtles over there that lay their eggs. And we're doing a 7-to-1 slope, which exceeds the safety standards of 4.1 on the slope going up towards the houses. Proposal with the limited fencing approach, it addresses staff's concern about potential access through the inlet channels. I'm proposing that we provide fences, lockable gates at each inlet, so nobody other than the property owners around it can get into it. Benefits for the municipality assumption of limited fencing approach. This approach aligns perfectly with local practices. It treats our subdivision fairly in consistency with other, and ensures professional maintenance under township control. Preserves the community aesthetics and supports environmental goals rather than imposing unnecessary fencing. I also want to briefly address the issue of liability. I know that liability was identified in the staff report as one of the reasons not for wanting it or to assume the pond. But there's no mention in the report of any projected increase in the township insurance premiums. The township already owns and manages many public spaces and water features, and this is a very low type risk, well-designed pond that would just be one more small element in the overall portfolio. There's no evidence that assuming the pond would trigger any significant new insurance cost, nor typically does it in any other municipalities. Just really routinely. I'm asking the Granite, this is our closing request to council. I'm asking the Granite Ridge Phase 2 be treated fairly and consistently with other subdivisions across the county, where there are similar ponds that are municipally owned and unfenced with safe designs. This pond was designed from the start with safety in mind, with the smaller slopes exceeding provincial and municipality standards. The report mentions liability, but there's no analysis of increased insurance cost, likely because the impact would be so negligible, as is typically in the case where other municipalities have similar stormwater management pond. The fencing and lockable gates at inlet channels will responsibly address staff concerns about direct access to the pond, consist with modern and best practices of community aesthetics. This is a practical and proven fair approach. We would greatly appreciate the council's support moving forward. In closing, I respectfully ask council to adopt an option 3, which would assume the ownership of the pond consistent with local precedents, approve the limited fencing and gating only the inlets. I appreciate the council's time and thoughtfully consideration of this request. I trust the council will choose a solution that is both fair to the subdivision and fully consistent with best practices in the county and province. This weekend that Scott McFadden and I, we found a whole lot of these ponds where people swim, and some of them actually have beaches that the councils or the townships look after and put lifeguards on them. And there's one in Peterborough that they just redid, and they've done a really nice job on Sherbrooke Street, and it's a really large pond, and they've done walkways and planted trees. It looks really nice. But I'd just like to say thank you for your time and consideration. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chesser. Does anyone have any comments or questions from council? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks very much, Jeff. You started out by saying that you're different because it's not a complete plan of
Condominium.
subdivision as opposed to other areas where it is. Can you just tell me what yours is and why it's different than a complete plan of subdivision? I missed that.
No, I was given bad advice 10 or 15, well, 12 years ago from a lawyer that says I have to do this because that's the way the township would want it. And then my lawyer got together with your lawyer, and they thought that was a great idea. But then when Scott McFadden got involved in it, he talked to the MOE, and they won't allow that, because anything that's going to be washing into the pond, a lot of it that's contaminated will be the salt and sand that's put on the roads. So we've learned all this since I retained Scott McFadden to help me with this project, but we've just been back and forth for, well, since 2009.
So when you say they won't, the MOE won't allow that, they won't allow what?
Someone else to own the stormwater management and the easements
Right,
running into the pond.
I see.
It's got to be something township has to maintain it, not a condominium. plan of condominiums, if the whole property is a plan of condominium, then it's done that way.
Right.
So because I'm not maintaining the roads or anything like that, it's just can't be done apparently.
I understand. Okay,
But I really don't want the fence. That's my thought. Like, I had sort of thought when we did all this that if you have grandkids or whatever, and we build you a house, that they go play in the water. I don't want docks or boats or anything like that in it. Just someplace for kids to play. Because when I was young, we used to, every Sunday, it was Super Sunday, and everybody went to the pond to swim there and play and ride motorbikes and piss off the neighbors and stuff like that. But we don't do that anymore.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Caddy.
Through your mayor, is there a type of fence that you would approve, like a workman's fence or rail fence or something up there? Or?
But my picture, when they build these houses, they're gonna have a nice piece of lawn down to the water and have access to the water. So no, nothing I can see that you could do. And all fences, like any, you'd need something. There's so many turtles over there and stuff like that. They're always up digging up sand and laying their eggs, and they're a big thing nowadays with turtles. And I actually think there's more than we had 3 nesting outside our bathroom window on Sunday morning. Well, trying to nest, 2 of them were digging in the driveway, and then they all moved over by the septic bed and put them in there.
If I may,
Yes, go ahead.
my comment might be like, if it's a young family with children, they're probably going to want the fence to keep their kids from going in the pond. That's just my thinking.
99% of our residents in phase 1 are retired people. And they have grandkids, they don't have kids. Like, there's no school bus pickups in there.
Any other comments or questions? Did staff have any comments?
Not at this time.
No, at the time. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation or delegation. Appreciate it. Now I would entertain a motion to receive that. Councillor Franzen for a mover and Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Cheshire. Okay, we can move on to item 10 of our agenda, which is staff reports. Item 10.1 is Public Works. 10.1.1, Evan Grieger, our Director of Public Works. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Lamstead. Through you, Mayor, to members of council before you today is the first of my 2 reports. This one is a result of the May 6, 2025 regular council meeting delegation regarding a request for additional culverts on Island Drive. We did do some background history work. We looked at some historical aerial photos just to gather some information, as well as reviewing our OSIM reports, which looks at the structures, specifically culverts greater than 1.5 meters, which is one of these culverts. And the reference point is that the culvert was installed in the 1970s. So this has been sort of historically been like this for an extended amount of time. I did bring back 3 options. First option before you today is an option just to proceed with construction. And this is with construction with no actual environmental impact study to assess what the overall impact of the culverts would. The environmental impact study for the construction would just be focusing on the construction side of it. So just looking at, how can you mitigate the damages to the surrounding water body through silt fences, dams, stuff like that. The second option before you is to start with that full scope environmental impact study. This will actually allow you to gather some additional information on the surrounding area. Look at, there's comparable bodies of water near that you can look at what the flows are, what the overall different, phosphorus levels, different levels of different contaminants are, the temperature of the body of water. They would take snapshots throughout the season because obviously there's more growth in the summer once the water warms up than there is in early spring. So they'd be able to have multiple data points that way. And then from that, they could provide us with some options to proceed with. And then the final option is just to stay status quo. As you can see, there's costs associated with each option, the costs associated with the construction. Obviously, it's tough to fully grasp to understand how much the cost would be, as everyone knows, especially recently in the last 3-4 months, costs have skyrocketed. The comparison we're using is from 2023, so could be higher than that. So the rough number for option 1 was about 400,000 plus or minus. The cost estimate for the environmental impact study, and this as well, you wouldn't know for sure what the cost is going to be until you went out into the public space to gather quotes, and that's roughly about $60,000. And then obviously status quo is just to remain. There would be no cost to the municipality, just obviously maintaining it And as mentioned in the status quo, that culvert is due for replacement in the next, 5-10 years. So at that time, we could do further investigations if that was the appetite of council at that time. So yeah, I'm here just to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and the three options. Anyone on council have any comments or questions? Councilor Weaver, go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, I have 2 questions and then comments and then another question and a comment. So thanks for, is that?
So really you have 3 questions and 2 comments?
Well, I phrased it that way
Okay.
because that may change. It's
Okay,
fluid.
thank you. Go ahead,
I
Councilor Weaver.
appreciate it. Thanks very much, Evan. Can you explain what you mean by a full monitoring program? And is this common protocol? And would this not be covered by an EIS?
So thank you through you, Mayor Lamb said to Councilor Braybrook. Yes, it is. That is what the EIS would encompass. So your EIS is sort of just a general environmental impact study. The scope of that EIS changes. So like I said, you still complete an environmental impact study if you're just doing the construction, but your scope of that is just to focus on the construction side of it. When you do that with the monitoring program, you say, okay, we need to look at this more holistically. Let's look at the greater lake health instead of just specific of where that construction is going to happen. They're looking at the overall lake health and how, the impacts of what the waterbed over, there's a section to the west, which is kind of similar. So what is happening in that area? It's gathering more data points and stuff like that. So it's just as a broader scope and more holistic view. And you could, the EIS with the broader scope would have multiple years of monitoring because each year is slightly different, obviously, with different melts and different temperatures and stuff like that. Whether the summer's warmer or cooler would most likely have an impact on what the growth is within the water.
Okay, thank you.
Question number 2?
Yes, yes. So in your experience, do you have knowledge of any other similar scenarios that included conducting a full range EIS monitoring for over several seasons?
I have experienced, thank you through your Mayor Lamb said, I have experienced different, not specific to lake health, but overall, if you're doing like a subdivision development, you look at that multiple years. So you're doing those different bird, for a subdivision, say in the field, you're doing different bird counts and stuff like that through the various seasons. So I've experienced that is sort of standard practice when you're just trying to get a greater understanding of the issue or what is the issue and what is the actual issue and how can we, what are, the options to mitigate such concerns.
Right, okay. I have, when the agenda came out, I did receive many correspondence from some of the, or half of the 87 petitioners and that sort of thing. So regarding option 2, I'm in favor of form of option 1. I'm not in favor of what you've suggested, what staff's suggesting is option 3. In option 2, I'm not in favor of spending potentially $60,000 to study an issue that, in my opinion, and I apologize for reducing my comment to the most basic, is plain for the eye to see. I've been on that bridge many times and I've stood there and I've watched when there was a good current and that one culvert was flowing through, and not being an engineer, I looked at all the properties on that side where the water feeds into and moves out of, and there's no buildup of sediment or anything such as the one that's at issue. So I think it's just a flow thing. If we can increase the flow, and that would be, I mean, you see in a lot of the docks, they buy the electric things to blow the sediment. This is something that's natural. That would be a slow, I guess, recuperation in the long run. You also speak potential for precedents to be set. Earlier in your report, you make mention of precedents where you say staff believe that completing this work would create a precedence in completing work to improve the aesthetics of a property. So with respect and for clarification, the petition as presented by Ms. Linda O'Meara on behalf of approximately 87 residents laid out several concerns, namely health of the lake, water quality, invasive species, which speak to the central concern of the residents and not aesthetics. So just for clarification. In option 3, you also make mention that due to the age of the existing culvert, it would be reviewed for replacement soon in the next potentially 10 years. and that it could potentially be realigned or repositioned. I don't know this realignment. Are you saying that that culvert that's there now, if there is a rehab between now and 10 years, you would just move that same culvert somewhere else on the
Thank you through your Mayor Lamb said, yes, that would be something that would be investigated. It would be investigated through the design and what the recommendations of the consultant would be at that time.
Okay. I don't know how the realignment would remedy the issue at hand. In my opinion, you're not addressing the water flow issue by keeping the same culvert, regardless of what position you put it in. If you move the culvert to the other side, eventually that side will become clear, and that north side potentially we would just be recreating the issue and not solving anything. So with that, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion if I may.
Yes, I think, yeah, go ahead. I think I have any other comments first?
Through your mayor to Evan. How many similar situations are there in the municipality in a very similar kind of situation? I can think of a couple myself, but.
Thank you, Councilor Franzen. Through your Mayor Lamb said, I believe the number in the report, I don't know off the top, I believe it's about 4 or 5. That's obviously something that would be a little more, research that would need to be completed. But like you said, off the top of your head, there's already some locations. I know down Kawartha Highway, there's a location there. That's one big one. There's a couple of causeways there that only have a single culvert. So that's just, 2 spots off the top of my head, as well as you go further north as well. So, yeah.
Okay, and Deputy Marshal?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lindsay. I'm kind of in the same vein as where Councilor Braver is going. The issue that the residents pointed to in their delegation was flow. And basically, I had to go back and look at it. Sorry. Their comment was, it's become evident that the existing one culvert is not capable of supporting the necessary water exchange. That's led to stagnation and then the decline in the overall health. So what I didn't see in the report was an assessment of how well functioning or not functioning this one culvert is. So if their argument is resting on the fact that it's not functioning as it needs to be and there's not sufficient flow, just causing backup and stagnant water, is that the case, and did we look at that?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Through your Mayor Lamb said, we did investigate that. There is no backup. There's no, if you were go to say a culvert that's got a beaver on, you can notice that the water's higher at one side comparatively to the other side. The water is equal on both sides, so there's no issue that way in capacity of the culvert. It's not backing up where the culvert's fully submerged or anything like that. The culvert is operating at full capacity, and there's no backup issue that way. Sorry for not including that in my report. It was just something that was a quick observation. So.
Councilor Cassidy, go ahead.
Comment, I would speak in favor of option 3. I think status quo is in the best interest of the ratepayers. We have multiple culverts that we could look at potentially having to replace. If we do this one, I don't think, from my understanding, it's a flow problem. There's not enough water coming in the other side to push out the other, keep the water moving. Stagnant water also supports life. You have a really nice swamp there that lots of stuff grows in. I think in the ratepayers' interest, we maintain it as it is and fix it in 10 years when it needs to be fixed.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just a question about how you gauge the 5 to 10 years when you really don't have a starting point. Like, is there something that you have in your, how you have your road scheduling and what roads are going to be improved and what your schedule is? Do you have that type of data? Because in your report, you're not sure whether it was early 70s, could be late 60s. So it could be minimum 55 years as well. I'm curious, and I have a follow-up question to that. I'm just curious where your starting point is with 5-10 years that it's going to have to be replaced.
Thank you, Councilor Brady. Through your Mayor Lamb said. So the replacement schedule, that the useful asset life, is determined by the structure itself. So we are using the early 1970s for the basis. We have OSIM reports, which are completed by structural engineers and look at culverts of that size. And from that, they provide recommendations as well. So they within that say, 5 to 10, this is what you're looking at do, and 1 to 5, this is what you're looking at to do, and what sort of work needs to be done on that structure to ensure that it's working properly. But the OSIMs is something that's completed every 2 years. So
Right. And just as an anecdotal comment, speaking with most of all the 87 petitioners, they have provided me with old video when there wasn't a causeway there with the water flow and their canoeing and whatnot. And you could just see a clear water flow. There's no buildup, there's no sediment, and there's something that's happened that's caused today's, I guess, predicament or situation that we find ourselves in as far as water stagnation. I understand there's life can be growing and everything, but I mean, we look at invasive species and whatnot. We're looking to eradicate certain types. So I mean, I look at it as just another question as far as the.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Fifth question. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
was that fit?
No, go ahead.
So I have to lay out like 4 questions and I have no more, or should I just say I have questions?
Go ahead, Councilor.
So I just look at it. Have you, in one of your options, you mentioned that it's going to be due to be replaced. So there's an assumption there that it may have to be replaced. So there's an acknowledgement there as far as that. So have you, and in your report, you say you haven't really done, not much has been done, and you really don't have records on the culvert or the causeway since its erection. Is that accurate? That you don't really have records of repairs or improvements on that?
So we do, there's been some maintenance on it, obviously there's been some embankment things where they've done replacement and added some more material, but specific to the capital construction costs, there has not been any record of a capital construction improvement in that area. Sorry, through your mayor.
Right, so through your merit, so there hasn't been any assessment of the integrity of that causeway.
Yeah, so through your mayor, so that is completed part of the OSIM report. So every time they complete an OSIM, which is every 2 years, they do an assessment of that, the surrounding infrastructure as well, including the abundance.
Okay, and go ahead.
So
Go ahead. Go ahead, Councilor.
So my last question, I promise, is again, and it's more of a comment. I'll reiterate that it's a water flow issue that we have here, and that there are remedies. I've spoken with local businesses that construction businesses that do that type of work, culvert work, and it would be possible. Hopefully, it's possible that we could perhaps get some quotes on any sort of repair or installation of 2 additional culverts. Now we know exactly what we're dealing with, whether that would be a viable option or not. And that leads me into my motion, subject to any other input.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks, Mayor Limsett. I'll come back to, I think the crux of the issue is, do we have a water flow problem or not? If we don't have a water flow problem, we don't need to fix the culvert. And that's not the cause of some of the things seeing happen in the lake. And by the way, invasive species don't get caused by just stagnant water. If we do have a flow problem, then we do need to look at replacement. So to me, the whole thing hinges on, do we have sufficient evidence to confirm that there is no water flow problem? And if there's doubt, then I think we need to go back and do a more thorough study to confirm or not. Because to me, that's it. Is it functioning properly? Yes, no. If it is, great, status quo. If it's not, then we need to look at the next step. But I'm just not hearing that we've done enough investigation and testing over time, I suppose, and over different weather conditions to ensure that that flow is proper. So I'm suggesting we go back and do a little bit more work to validate that.
Okay, and I think we have Councillor Cadigan for a question.
Through your mayor, I'm just wondering, do we have authority to make changes to the water? Are we doing something that the Conservation Society, like, is it the Porca area?
There is no conservation.
Do you know?
Through you, Mayor Lamb said, on that side of the lake, it's actually Department of DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, because the conservation authorities only come up, Orca only comes up to the south side of that lake, as well as Kawartha Conservation comes a little bit up Nogies and stuff like that, but on that side, it's just the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So that would be a question for them, and it's a federal organization, so you know how it's dealing with them and getting answers back.
Councillor Franzen, want to comment?
Yeah, a couple comments. Through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, I think we're probably setting a precedent. I think we may have to substantially increase our budgetary process. And even if we agreed with option one, I don't believe we could do that till 2025 budget cycle.
We're in 2045.
Yeah, probably 26.
26, yeah.
Councillor Brayberg.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Franzen's, and I'm conscious of the expenditure as well. But as we all know, there are avenues that we can pursue to defray some of the costs, whether it be through grants. We have a new company that we're bringing on board as far as grant match, and that could be something that could be pursued once a decision is made as to how we're going to move forward on this.
Okay. I have a comment. Finally got to my comment. I look at that culvert as the top of a funnel. You can pour water in a funnel slowly and lots of water goes through it. As soon as you start to increase the flow, the funnel blocks up and the water doesn't go through. And I think that's what's happening there. When it's really wanting water flow, it doesn't happen. It's not enough flow. So then you get all the stuff on the east side of that culvert. All the sediment just stays there. All the natural stuff decomposes and stays there and just keeps building up. I mean, you've kind of been watching this since the mid 70s when that happened, that those shorelines are now more weed covered. There's more silt in there. There's less larger fish because it used to be a habitat for some bigger muskies and bass in there, and it is no longer that. So I think the causeway and the culvert has restricted the flow of water substantially. I think the addition of another culvert will get more water flow, and that'll clean that whole bay up a little bit. You're not going to get rid of species. They're all going to live there, but it's just, I think it's the matter to keep the water clear. As the water's coming out of the other end of that, there's a lot of bacteria coming out into the other lake. I think if you get the water flowing, you will eliminate a lot of that bad stuff. Just my own opinion. Okay. Is anyone prepared to make any form of motion? Councillor Cadigan, go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we proceed with option 3, status quo.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any other conversation?
Recorded vote.
Okay. I will not call for the vote then.
You ready for the vote?
Yes.
Councillor Brayberg, are you in favor?
No.
Councillor Cadigan?
Yes.
Councillor Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lamshead?
No.
Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
I abstain. I don't have enough information to make that call.
That vote is failed.
So is anyone else prepared to make a different motion? Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to support option 2.
Do I have anyone who will second that motion? There is no seconders. That motion has failed. So Deputy Mayor Armstrong, would you care to try a motion?
Yes, sure. Let me jump into the fray here. Let me propose that we request staff to go back and do a more thorough investigation of the functionality of that culvert and bring that back to us along with this report.
Just a comment, like the functionality, and how that functionality is affecting the issue at hand. Because, you know, what problem are we trying to solve? We're trying to
Flow.
address flow and its effects of the lack of flow. That was just my comment, so I didn't want to.
I don't think I changed the motion. I think it's broad enough to include that. Functionality includes flow.
Before we have more conversation, do I have a seconder for that motion? I don't see a seconder. So that motion has failed. We're struggling with this one. Anyone else prepared to make, yes, Donna, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, just a thought. Because the OSIM investigations have to take place every 3 years. The last one was 2024. Thank you. So there will be another one on that culvert within the next 3 years. So with council support during that process, having the engineers that do that work have, you know, a really good look, and then we could come forward at that time. I mean, when the OSIM report is completed, it is all part of the asset management plan, replacement schedules under that. So we try to make sure we balance the ones that really need done and are due in the plan, which is why this one is due over that length of time based on the data that was collected as part of the last OSIM report. So that would mean the next one would be 2027. Just a thought.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering about the cost of another culvert there. Because if you increase the flow in, you increase the flow out, you clean the water. Go ahead, Councillor Britt.
Another question, is it a possibility, and I'll defer to staff as far as costs. If we were to obtain, as a matter of interest, 3 quotes from local businesses that would complete that work, on what it would entail and what it would cost to install 2 additional culverts. Is there any additional cost to that? And it would be more of an informational thing to bring back to council saying, this is how much it would cost.
Thank you, Councilor, through Mayor Lamside. To proceed with even gathering any types of quotes, you would still need to do the design. So your design cost is there. So and your design is in the range of 30, 50 plus your EIS. So you need those have to be done. It's not just like throwing in an entrance culvert. It's much more substantial to that where you need to do that through the purchasing, and you're really not recommended to go fishing for prices. If you have the intent of going out to do it, that's okay. But if you're going out just to get prices to see what it's going to cost, that's more of the not really okay. Better terminology. But in all reality, you could do where you could do a cost estimate. You have the design, you can do a cost estimate. The cost estimate could be brought at that time, but to go and get 3 quotes from companies, say local contractors or whoever, it'd be considered fishing. So you'd have to almost get those quotes and then you have to wait. It's recommended to wait about a year to let sort of things settle, because you can't just go into the market and say, okay, I'm trying to find a number that I like. If I don't see that number, well, I'm not doing that work. So it's especially with the purchasing policy, and I don't know if purchasing wants to speak more to it, but I think I kind of covered it. So.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong, go ahead.
Glutton for punishment over here.
Try it again.
I'm going to try again. Given that this problem didn't occur overnight, given that it won't be solved overnight, it's an urgent one, although it needs to be addressed. So in that context, I would propose a motion that as part of the next scheduled OSIM project, we include a specific assessment of the functionality of this culvert with obviously recommendations for any mediation.
You are a glutton for punishment, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Apparently.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Francis for a second. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I think I can call for the vote. Not having a recorded vote this time. All in favor? That motion has carried.
Thank
We
you.
were as vague as we possibly can, have it on purpose. Thank you. Okay, we can move now on to item 10.1.2 of our agenda. Evan Grieger, our Director of Public Works. Would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lamb, through your mayor to members of council. Hopefully this one's a little bit quicker. We're just looking for authorization to proceed with signing an agreement with the Central Eastern Area Snowmobile Region District 2. And it's just to operate trails within the municipal road allowances. Part of that is we did have our solicitor review as well as our insurance just to provide comment, just to ensure we're protected. There's slight changes, but basically it's just to give me the authorization to sign it and proceed. And I like it because they're right ahead. It's not, okay, you're not getting this in December or January, it's June. So we have lots of time to go back and forth, but it's just something that just to close that up and continue to support the great industry of snowmobiling. I know this year was a really good year for them. Hopefully next year continues to be in part. So yeah. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you very much, Evan. Anyone have any comments or questions for Evan? Seeing none, is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Braber, go ahead.
Thank you. No questions, Evan. So a motion to council receive the report and the council authorize the Director of Public Works to sign the attached memorandum of understanding with Central East Area Snowmobile Region District 2.
Do I have a seconder? I see Councilor Cadigan for a seconder. Any conversation? Go ahead, Deputy.
Just a comment, and this is real positive. In that agreement, the Snowmobiles Club agrees to annually remove litter from snowmobile trail, which I think is a big plus as they line a lot of our roadways. And in the past, they have always been good stewards of trails. I see them out there every late fall and spring, and they do clean them up. So big win for us.
Thank you for that comment. I do assist with that myself. I've carried many backpack full of garbage out of the 4th Highland Signature Site Park. Okay, any other conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much, Evan. Okay, we can move on to 10.2 of our agenda, where recreation facilities, we have none. 10.3 is fire and emergency services, we have none. And 10.4 is building and planning, and 10.4.1, Adele Arbor, our planner. Would you like to speak to this item, please? We moved over there on me.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
and
Adele.
through you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor. Based on the information from the county and discussions with the property owner, staff are requesting that council receive this report from the planner and defer making a decision today to allow staff to acquire additional input from the municipalities, insurers, and legal counsel for council's information prior to making a decision. I also think it's important to arrange a meeting between the municipal staff and the property owner, as well as his staff that are helping him work towards going through with the subdivision plan. And we would also like legal representatives at the table as well, so we can arrive at a mutually agreeable solution regarding the stormwater management pond.
Okay. Is anyone prepared to make that as a motion, as to defer and get the meeting together? Councilor Cadigan for a mover. Councilor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation? My only comment is this needs to happen sooner rather than later. So we need to, this has been a long time coming to fruition. I know this is a change at the 11th hour, but in order to make things progress, we need to move fairly quickly on this. Do I have my comment? Any other comments? I have a mover and a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much, Adele. We can move on to item 10.4.2 of our agenda, which is additional residential units. And Chris Jones, our external planner, I think you wanted to speak to this item, please.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so yeah, further to our meeting May 20th, and in that memo that I spoke to on May 20th, I outlined the nuts and bolts of proposed regulations to authorize additional residential units. The direction from council at that time is in front of you, in the form of resolution 2025-193. That was to come back with the draft official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment. So those items are appendices. The draft OPA and the draft ZBA are appendices to this memo. There was some direction from council to take another look at items A and H, and Item A had to do with a regulation that would require all existing buildings to be lawful and compliant with the zoning bylaw. What I'm suggesting there is we back that up to just a requirement that existing buildings are lawful. In other words, they were put there with a building permit. And then item H had to do with a restriction in the front yard, and that has just been deleted altogether. That's I think Mr. Mayor, at this point, I'll turn it back to council, and if there's specific questions, the next step, if council has comfort with the draft OPA and regulations, would be to try to schedule this for a statutory meeting in July.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Does anyone on council have any comments or questions regarding this additional residential units? I'm seeing Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lamson. Thanks, Chris. I want to raise the same concern that I did at the last meeting regarding this topic. Among the 1,000 or so lots that would be eligible for additional residential units, about 200 of them are in shoreline residential zones. And so 2 sets of comments. The first is clearly adding a dwelling on those properties will put additional pressure on the lake. We'll have more people, we'll have more boats, more fishing. And I'm very concerned about the impact that will have on the quality of the water and the light that sustains. So I would like to exempt those from this proposed bylaw. The other thing, and I think this is what we concluded, Chris, is that Halliburton as a county did exactly that. They excluded shoreline residential areas from additional, shoreline residential zones from being allowed to add another residence. So there's precedent for that. And a third thing, if we think about what benefit is housing going to provide, we're not looking for mansions, additional mansions, we're looking for affordable housing. So the people who come here to work in the summer and other times at our resorts, at our stores, et cetera, can find a place to live. Because that's what we keep hearing is a real impediment to economic development, is the ability to attract and house these people. And they also, most of them will need transportation. And if they're sitting on a lake somewhere, mostly in the north, that's not going to achieve the objective of providing housing for our workers and employees. So my request, and later I would make a motion, but I'd like for us to exempt those 200 properties. That still leaves us with about 800, which should be more than sufficient to accommodate the need or the demand for additional accommodation.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? I just have one, if no one else has any more. I have one about buildings being lawful to measure to ensure that any building on the lot requiring a building permit has a record of a building permit. We probably have thousands of buildings that were built long before the building permit was ever issued in this municipality. So how do you deal with that? I mean, you've got a structure that's been there for 85 years and you want to find a record of a building permit? That's not going to happen. So I think there's got to be a much simpler way to deal with those structures. They've been there for 80 years and haven't fallen down yet. They're probably not going to fall down. So I don't know if you have a solution for that, Chris?
Okay, so back to me.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, your question first. The reference to requiring a building permit, if we're attributing that to the regulation requiring buildings to be lawful, the term lawful is used purposely because for the exact reason you're raising is that Ontario Building Code and building permits have only really been around since the 60s, maybe. But the lawfulness, sort of as a legal term, would indicate that if a building predated the building code or predated the requirement for a building code, for a building permit, it would still be lawful. So that's why that terminology is used. If that helps address that comment.
Okay, as long as that's a good explanation. As long as that works, that's good.
So if I could just speak to the deputy mayor's comments, and so if I'm understanding the deputy mayor's comments, I think that the gist of it or the thrust of it is we're looking at, through these instruments, we're looking at allowing additional residential units in 4 zone categories. 3 of those zone categories are not shoreline or are not waterfront, but one of them, the shoreline residential zone, is. Now, I've worked with the county GIS department and we've tried to crunch a lot of numbers and come to some determination as to how many lots or potentially how many shoreline residential lots would be included. And my memo, I think I referenced that all in, we're talking about 1,000 parcels, which would meet the area requirement. And then the area requirement by far is the biggest sort of factor in removing sort of candidacy, I guess, if you will, from, or eligibility. And the shoreline residential, of course, it is the shoreline residential by virtue of the zone reflects parcels that are on a public road. So that it checks that box. Now you can have SR lots that are on lake trout lakes, and so that has been that's been factored. And again, that's where we come up with this sort of round number of about 1,000 parcels, of which about 250 of those are in the SR. I concur with the deputy mayor's comments that ARUs and the our motivation to try to get this done to address a housing type and affordability. The SR zone probably isn't the place where, you know, affordability and housing type are really issues. And then I also concur with their comment that the County of Haliburton, through the county official plan, precludes all waterfront areas from ARUs. And I believe the District of Muskoka is the same way. Now, in drafting the OPA and ZBA in the manner I have, I am taking my lead from the proposed or the adopted county official plan, County of Peterborough official plan, which does permit ARUs in shoreline areas, provided that they are on a public road, but not on lake trout lakes. So we are, to sort of summarize that issue, and I concur or understand where the deputy mayor is coming from. We don't have to necessarily change anything or revise anything today, but if it is council's wish to pull this out of the shoreline residential zone at this juncture, or at the time in the near future when these amendments are actually considered for passage, that's an option, because at this point we're writing our own policy. But we do need to be mindful that we know what the county official plan says, and it's going to be approved at some point. And when that happens, we would be in a position of likely having to initiate our own housekeeping amendment to establish conformity with the plan, unless something changes in the county plan. But that's sort of where the way the table's been set at this point.
Okay. I'm not too sure I agree with taking all them lots out of that, because there are some lots that are shoreline residential that are huge lots, and they would accommodate a small residential unit. I mean, there's many acreages. There's not a lot of them, but there's a few that butt our lakes that butt onto a publicly maintained road. That I know one for a fact that their son lives there now, and they want a separate little building for him. It might be attached to the house, but so that's one. You would be taking one accommodation, one employed person out of this municipality just by changing that. I think there's very few that I would support a residential unit on, but there's the odd one that probably could accommodate that. So I don't think you want to take that entire section out because the county official plan is going to put it back in anyway. Hi, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Lampson. And that's a very good point. However, I think we're talking about a very few out of 200 and some, which could be handled through exception. So I'd rather make the bylaw to accommodate the majority, not the few. I think that's how we have to govern. So I will make the motion that we receive the report. We direct them. Is this the right one? Yes. To prepare the, thank you. I was getting very confused. That we received the report. We direct planning to exempt or to take the shoreline residential zone out of that and keep the remaining 3, and then move forward to schedule a public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Faber, go ahead.
So I'll second that with a question. So for clarification, there would still be an opportunity for an exemption to be applied for as the cases occur with this being put in place.
That's my understanding. I'm looking for nods.
Dale, go ahead, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, someone could apply for an amendment to the zoning bylaw to request an exemption, and it would go through the same process with a public meeting, analysis report by Mr. Jones, and a recommendation coming forth to council for their consideration.
If I could just piggyback on that too, is again, if we're talking about precluding, I agree with what Adele's saying, but that prohibition or exclusion, I presume would also be in the official plan amendment that we're talking about. And if that's the case, if somebody's looking to establish one in the shoreline, they would need, at least while our official plan is still in effect, they would need an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment.
Yeah, so that seems a little onerous. Okay,
Just
go
to,
ahead.
if I can, Mayor Lynch, just to add on that, I think that the municipality would be applying for a plan amendment prior to any individuals having to do that. So we would have to file an official plan amendment to make it more restrictive in terms of the allowance of additional residential units. And then that would be done and pave the way for an individual to just do a zoning bylaw amendment. And I support that because the county of Peterborough is very different. I was asking the deputy mayor of Cameron Monahan how many cottagers they have, and he said we might have 1. So we have very different. I don't see a problem with us having a slightly more restrictive or specific official plan amendment to suit our unique municipality.
Councilor Franz.
I have 2 questions through you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
First of all, Adele, what would be the additional costs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a fee for a combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. Chris Jones is correct in terms of our policies. In order to restrict that, we would need someone who wants to apply for an amendment to both. And I believe, I don't even want to guess, but maybe in the neighborhood of $2,500. But we've reduced the price for a separate OP and a zoning bylaw amendment. We've got a combined one. So if you need both, then you're making application to amend both. But Mr. Jones and I will consider if we could put something in the policy that may allow some leeway to have applications come forward. I don't know if we could come up with some wording on that, but we'll certainly take a look at it.
And my second question through you, Mayor, would that also include a garden suite? If somebody wanted to put a garden suite on their lakefront property?
What's a garden suite?
For an in-law or a mother. I believe that's the proper term for it.
Does anybody want to field that question?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe Chris Jones will follow what I have to say, but we have nothing in our zoning bylaw currently for that, and it would be considered an additional dwelling unit.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Go ahead, Councillor Franzen. Can you
Oh,
repeat that?
through the mayor, the question was, would that also include a garden suite, accommodations for an in-law or mother or grandmother, et cetera?
Okay, if the reference to a garden suite is to a reference to what really is the longstanding Planning Act and official plan permission to allow garden suites subject to a temporary use bylaw. So my answer would be no. These garden suites are a different animal than than from an ARU. An ARU is intended to be a permanent fixture. Garden suites are intended to be temporary. And just as an aside, in almost 30 years of doing this planning business, I don't know if I could count more than 4 or 5 garden suites that I've ever sort of administered or come across. Just at least in my circles, they haven't been that common. And as we and other municipalities move forward with ARUs, I really feel that ARUs are going to become the predominant form of sort of secondary accommodation, just because it's permanent. You don't have to give it back after 10 or 15 or 20 years.
And I do agree. The province and the federal government are wanting something like this happening, so
yeah,
these are going to happen regardless of what restrictions we put on it. Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor and we have a seconder? Any further comments on the motion? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion failed. Okay. Does anyone else have a subsequent motion they can put on the floor about additional residential units? Go ahead, Councillor Trent.
That council received the report and that council give direction to the planning department to schedule a public meeting in accordance with the Planning Act.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. Any further conversation?
Recorded vote, please.
Okay, we can have a recorded vote. I will hand that back to you. I don't see any more conversation. You can please call the vote.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Armstrong, are you in favor?
No.
Councillor Brayber?
Yes.
Councillor Cadigan?
Yes.
Councillor Franzen?
Yes.
Mayor Lamshead?
Yes.
That vote is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. That will be carried. We can move on to item, and thank you very much, Chris Jones, our external planner, and Adele for your insights.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well. Okay, we can move on to 10.5 of our agenda, which is finance, and 10.5.1 is Donna Taggart, our CAO treasurer. Would you like to speak to this item, please?
Yes, thank you, and through you. So before you is a request for a resolution of support from council for the submission of an application for funding under the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Program. So just to let you know, the municipality to date has spent about $250,000 on cleanup costs as a result of the ice storm that took place March 28 and March 29. So costs incurred to date relate to staff overtime, third-party tree removal services, chipping, brushing, removal, equipment rentals, and the additional costs for propane for the extended use of generators. With the amount of damage from this storm, there will certainly be additional spending in the coming months as the cleanup efforts continue. So for assistance with these costs, there is funding through, it's called MDRA program, and MDRA is intended to assist municipalities with additional costs incurred that would not have happened without the occurrence of the natural disaster. So under the program, costs up to 3% of the municipality's own purpose tax levy from the most recent financial information return, which would be about $328,000 for Trent Lakes, would be reimbursed by the province up to 75%. Costs beyond 3% would be covered at 95% by the province. So I have listed eligible and ineligible costs for you in the report. A funding application must be submitted within 120 days of the disaster, which would be July 28th. I can tell you that staff are well on their way to completing that application. And as a reminder, the program, if you read the specs in it, does require the municipality to have spent at least 3% of the levy or the 328,000 in order to be eligible. However, the premier during his tour of this area committed to waiving that 3% amount, but Trent Lakes will meet that anyway. So therefore, I'm requesting that council receive the report and further that council support the submission of an MDRA application requesting assistance incurred as a result of the March 28th and March 29th ice storm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna Taggart. Any comments or questions for Donna? I think we're well on our way to spending way too much money, but it's very nice that we're getting it cleaned up. Appreciate that. Okay, is anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Franzen, go ahead.
Yeah, that council received a report from the CAO and that council support the submission of the municipal disaster recovery assistance application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Franzen. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cadigan. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Donna Taggart. We can move on now to 10.6 of our agenda, which is administration. We have none. 10.7 is corporate services. 10.7.1, Bianca Dragicevic, our deputy clerk. Would you like to speak to this item? Easy for me to say, right?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Lambshead. Before council are the expenses submitted for the month of May for council's approval and authorization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bianca. Okay, any comments or questions or anyone prepared to make a motion? Go ahead, Councillor Braver.
Motion approved.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation now? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, thank you very much, Bianca. We can move on to item 11 of our agenda, which is notices of motion. 11.1 is Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Do you have a notice of motion? Would you like to speak to that item, please?
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to get through this. Whereas council previously considered similar correspondence for information from the town of Orangeville regarding responsible growth and opposition to elements of Bill 5. That was at our June 3rd meeting, but that was after the consultation period had ended. And whereas Bill 5 was subsequently passed and it's continuing to be met with considerable opposition, council may want to reconsider support. Whereas the municipality of Trent Lake supports increasing housing supply and economic growth, but believes this must be achieved without undermining environmental protection or compromising the integrity of municipal planning processes or infringement of Indigenous rights in Treaty 20. And whereas Bill 5 introduces substantial changes to environmental planning legislation, including rolling back environmental assessments and protections and the repeal of the Endangered Species Act. And whereas Bill 5 creates special economic zones that may override local planning authority. Whereas Bill 5 risks weakening safeguards for Ontario's natural heritage and reducing the role of municipalities in managing growth in a responsible and locally informed manner. Whereas Bill 5 reduces constitutionally guaranteed consultation requirements with First Nations. And whereas Bill 5 was rushed through the legislative process. Now therefore be resolved that Trent Lakes Council joins with our neighbor Curve Lake First Nation, and we've had this discussion with them, in requesting that Bill 5 be repealed and any new legislation to advance housing and infrastructure growth respect existing environmental protections, municipal planning authority, and the rights of First Nations, and further that a copy of this be sent along to the Premier, the appropriate ministers, and our local AMO, and of course our local MPP.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, and finally, that a copy of the resolution be sent to other Peterborough County municipalities.
Okay, thank you very much for your motion. Does anyone have be a seconder for that motion? Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Now, any further conversation? Councillor Braber, go ahead.
Thank you, and I appreciate Deputy Mayor's motion. I appreciate the spirit and intent. It's a difficult issue to navigate. It involves areas of passionate concern and nuance. This is not lost on me. My concern is the lack of development in Trent Lakes. Over 90% of our monies coming into our municipality is paid by way of taxes from our residential ratepayers. These taxes are increasing year after year with little sign of relief. I believe we cannot sustain this practice. We have to look at ways of offsetting these taxes. And I do believe it's through responsible development in keeping with our municipality's character that would allow us to build on our tax base and also potential at attracting commercial businesses as well. While we need to protect our municipality's natural environment and its wildlife, we also have to protect its financial health and strengthen its future. It is certainly a challenging balance. Although Bill 5 is currently enacted as law, there has not been an opportunity to fully assess its impact on our municipality as it is less than 1 month old. At this point in time, I'm not in support of the motion. This is not to say that my opinion would not change should more data and information come available as to Bill 5's effect on Trent Lakes. By my not supporting this motion, it should not be construed as not having concerns about our First Nations rights as well. I will respect our First Nations right to be consulted as it concerns Trent Lakes matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have any other comments regarding this motion? Councillor Franz, go ahead.
I do support this motion. I think it's important that we maintain our species at risk. I also believe that environmental protection is very important to this province and to this municipality.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments? I have a comment. I just, when they say they're going to repeal this Endangered Species Act, I'm sure there's going to be a replacement act that should have probably been thought of before we repeal an act. But so I don't think we're not going to have an Endangered Species Act. I think they just want to slightly change it. And as far as conversations with our First Nation people, directly from the mouth of an MPP they're still going to have lots of consultation. But it's ongoing. Instead of you get development to a spot, then it stops and we have a consultation with our First Nation people, then it can start again. I think the conversation is going to continue. It's not going to just start and stop. It's going to be a continuous conversation. And I will confirm that with MVP Smith tomorrow night when we have our meeting. But that's what was discussed with us as mayors a couple of weeks ago, that conversation is now going to be more fulsome and more consistent and ongoing at all the time, rather than stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. Hopefully that is the truth and that is what happens. And I think that's a much better conversation as the development goes along. So I do not support this motion either. Go ahead, Councillor Franz. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Armstrong.
Thank you very much. Just a quick one. I too, of course, support continued economic growth and diversification of our tax base. I think it's very important. Any development is a balancing act between all of these things. And my concern is that Bill 5 goes too far in taking away the local planning authority, the voice of the Indigenous, and some of those safeguards that are already in there for environment planning. So I'm certainly not against growth. We need to diversify and grow our tax base. But it all needs to be in balance. And I think that Bill 5 tipped the balance away from all of those things that have served us very well in the past.
Go ahead, Councillor Franz.
I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Okay. Any further conversation regarding this motion? My only point is that I don't think we know all about this motion, this bill yet. I think we need a lot more information about it, and it will be coming to us. So I don't want to slap it down until we see the rest of it, but so that's just my comment. Okay, yeah, I think I can pass that over to you, Jesse Clark, our clerk. You can call the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Franzen, are you in favor?
Yes.
Mayor Lamshead?
No.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councillor Braybrook?
No.
Councillor Cadigan?
Yes.
That motion is carried.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse, for calling the vote. Now we can move on to item 12 of our agenda, which is correspondence for information. We have a few things on that item there. Does anybody want to talk about any one of them or? Councilor Cadigan, go ahead.
12.1, if we may.
Okay, go right ahead.
Through your mayor, the Cavendish Culture and Recreation Committee is planning the Cavendish Carnival for July 19th. They have many of the similar activities as past with pickleball tournament, hopefully happening again, baseball tournament. There will be some games for kids to play, barbecue in the Jackson Pavilion, etc.
Great day for Cavendish peoples and everybody in the municipality is welcome. So thank you for that. Councilor Cadigan. Okay, anyone like to speak to any other item, or we can receive them all at one motion, or we can talk about them individually? Go ahead, Councilor Graber.
Motion to receive them all.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. Any further conversation? Being none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Now we can move on to item 13 of our agenda, which is correspondence for action. We have item 13.1 is the City of Peterborough Bill 6 Safer Municipalities Act. Anyone like to speak to that? Make a motion. Deputy Mayor Armstrong. Go ahead.
Motion to receive?
Okay, do I have a seconder for the motion to receive? Councilor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? Motion is carried. Item 13, we can do all these at once or we can talk to them individually. It's entirely up to us.
Could I pull 13.3 out?
Okay, well, we'll just go down with this. I think we'll just
Okay.
go, yeah, but if we're going to pull a couple out, we might as well do
Yeah.
that. So item 13.2 is District of Prairie Sound Municipal Association. Councilor Cadigan, go ahead.
Motion to receive.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. And we can go to item 13.3 is the Kin Mountain Area Canada Committee. They're actually asking for funding, so I think we should have a discussion of this. If I can find that on my iPad, which I'm so far behind. Oh, I don't, historically, have we given money to this? I know we did years ago, but I don't know if we have recently.
Last year we did.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yes.
I'm just not sure the amount. That's, I meant to ask you, so I didn't surprise you. My apologies.
Yes. Through you, I don't know that, but I can find that out very quickly. I want to say it was 250 potentially.
These are important little things to do in our community. Go ahead, Councilor Cadigan.
I was just going to say, everybody else submits a form at the start of the year. Why can't the Kin Mountain Canada Day Committee do that as well?
Very, very good point, Councilor Cadigan. Very good point. Maybe we should reiterate that to them. We can still decide whether or not we're going to give any money, but we've given it. Go ahead, Councilor Cadigan, or Councilor Franzen, sorry.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we support them to the same level as we did last year.
Okay. And perhaps we can suggest that they put it in as a grant.
And suggest the letter. I agree that 100%. That shouldn't be dealt with any differently than anybody else.
And if they don't get it in next year, we won't be funding it, maybe?
Maybe not.
Yeah, okay. Just an idea. Okay, that's a motion. Do I have a second for that motion? Second that motion. Okay, for conversation. Anyone have any conversation about that? I mean, I think it's important little events that happen in all our communities and it's no different in Kinmount. Okay, no other conversation. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Okay, we can move on to item 13.4, which is the town of Caledon. Would anyone like to speak to that item? Illegal land use. Go ahead, Councilor Graber.
Motion to receive.
Okay. Do I have a Councilor Cadigan for a seconder? Any conversation about illegal land use? I'm seeing none. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Now we can move on to item 14 of our agenda, which is bylaws. Item 14.1 is the deeming bylaw, spur 15 spur 2. I don't know if anyone would like to speak to that item or converse about that or. And we have item 14.2. We can do them both in one motion if you'd like. That's to stop up and close the series 42. So, Councillor Cadigan, go ahead.
Motion to approve both.
Okay. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Armstrong, for a seconder. Any further conversation about the bylaws? See none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We can move on now to item 15, which is announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? I was going to say there's a carnival day at the Cabinet Community Center, but I think someone stole my thunder. So.
Sorry, Gary.
It's okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Cadigan. Okay, we can move on now to item 16 of our agenda, which is our closed meeting. I would entertain a motion to recess our regular meeting and go into close. Councillor Cadigan for a mover, Councillor Franzen for a seconder, and we are 16.1 of our agenda, which is we are going into closed under the authority of the Municipal Act, the Ontario Municipal Act, section 239.2, to discuss personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, municipal employees, and D, labor relations and employee negotiations, municipal employees. I will call for the vote. All in favor? Might already did that. That motion is carried. So we are now in close. Thank you very much. We can now move on to item 16.2 of our agenda, which is rising from closed. I would entertain a motion for same. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover, Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 17 of our agenda, which is business arising from our closed meeting. Item 17.1 is the adoption of the minutes from the June 6, 2025 closed meeting.
Adoption is amended.
Adoption is amended. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover. Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any conversation? I guess we can't have them. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on now to item 18 of our agenda, which is the adoption of the confirming bylaw. Item 18.1 is a confirming bylaw. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Cadigan to adopt the confirming bylaw. Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We can move on to item 19 of our agenda, which is adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Councillor Franzen for a mover. Councillor Graybert for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried.